Have you found the secrets in the Candela Obscura book?
Not only does this book give you the rules for Candela Obscura, but it also tells you the story of Ezra Ashford.
You see, the book is posed to be Ezra Ashford's original journal, and Ezra Ashford, of course, is a lightkeeper for Candela Obscura. Throughout the book, you might find some notes that are written by Ezra Ashford, talking about the different assignments that they had taken over, and even the circle that they are the lightkeeper of, the Circle of Nightside. You'll find different notes about how Ezra got along with the Circle members and how the Circle members themselves got along, and different notes that Ezra has for each member. However, the most important thing is the assignment report for NBG 843. In this assignment, they find a stele of ancient Halen, and if you don't know what a stele is, it's basically a stone tablet with different writings on it from way back when. Ezra Ashford is an expert in ancient Halen, so they get to translating this stele, to which they find that it says, "Thrice seen, thrice spoken, open the doors, call the words, turn the wheel." Objects like this. Then, presumably on that same stele, we get objects like this. There's ancient Halen written all over it saying, "The wise keep the green lion, the beauty of precious stones, which calls the bodies of the dead to life, hidden away from those who linger in the dark. It is not until the obscure is brought to light that the green of the lion may be freed." So if we're keeping track here, the green lion is a gem that can bring people back to life. Interesting. And now this is where we have a sudden twist to Ezra's story. You can pause to read all of this, but it basically just says that Ezra isn't going to be telling Candela Obscura about the stele that they found, or the information that they had found from it. Additionally, Ezra sends the Circle of Nightside down into Old Fair to find the origins of this stele and what it may connect to. A little after the stele is discovered, we find notes that were written by Morgan, one of the members of the Circle of Nightside, who was basically keeping notes about what had happened during their trek into Old Fair. And during that trek, they found an altar that was covered with glyphs of ancient Halen. And once they said that statement of thrice seen, thrice spoken, all of those glyphs began to light up. And then they heard a booming voice, a being that called itself the Eternal One. This Eternal One had thought that the person talking to it was Iomine, the Empress from Old Fair, also thinking that it was in the time of Old Fair. But the Circle of Nightside had educated this being into what had happened since then, and then it made an offer. It offered to protect New Fair, but the Circle of Nightside would have to find a vessel for this being, and they would have to open a thinning for it to enter this world. Now, why is that important? Well, throughout the book, we start to see these newspaper clippings talking about Otherware, which, if you're not familiar, Otherware was the enemy during the last Great War, which was in Candela Obscura. These newspaper clippings basically say that Otherware now has access to electricity, which was the main reason why New Fair and the Fairlands in general had won the war against Otherware. There are multiple clippings stating that there's another great war coming, and there's more talking about how we are defending ourselves against them, but the most important part about all of this is Ezra's daughter was killed during the last great war. So Ezra has quite a bit of a motivation to find something that might protect people against other harm that might come to them. And now we start to see the quick descent of Ezra Ashford. They write multiple notes talking about how dumb Candela Obscura is for not using any of its magical phenomenon for protecting people or using it in wars. And most importantly, Ezra Ashford is keeping this right under the nose of Candela Obscura. They don't know that Ezra is sending the Circle of Nightside deeper into Old Fair to investigate the origins of this stele. And it's at this point that Ezra begins to write their notes in Ancient Halen while also using an encryption tool, Caesar's cipher. Which, if you're not familiar, it's basically shifting the letters over so that if A is this, then you move it over 3 and then that's where A actually is. Now, you can't always remember exactly which letter goes where, so that's why Ezra begins to use these small little symbols all throughout their notes to show where that shift is made. But you've seen these symbols somewhere before, right? Yes, these are at the very beginning of the book, and these symbols directly correlate to the page number to how many shifts the letters make. And here in the bottom half of this note, we find Ezra stating that they could create protections to keep other creatures coming out of this thinning, and the fact that the Eternal One was clearly protecting their ancestors, so how could they give up this chance? Well, if the Eternal One really was the ancient defense system of Old Fair, maybe they could talk to the Eternal One themselves, figure out what kind of vessel it needs, what kind of fuel it may need. In order to make it to Old Fair, Ezra needs to request the Unbroken Band, which is an item that protects people that trek into Old Fair. However, Candela Obscura denied it. In addition, as Ezra was speaking to the Circle of Nightside, many of the members disagreed with them. So much so, they decided that they were going to destroy all of the glyphs that were on that ritual table. All of the members but one, Morgan. So, a plan was hatched. Morgan and Ezra would make it to the Haven Hills Lighthouse and open up a thinning there. In hopes of doing this safely, Ezra had created geometric sigils that would protect both themselves and Morgan. They would then reverse the astrolabe that is found in the lighthouse at Haven Hills and open up a thinning. What could go wrong? They met with a person that maintains this lighthouse. They're named Nels, and Ezra used their position as a lightkeeper to go up to the astrolabe and take a look at it. While they were up there, they created those sigils of protection, which took 3 hours, and then Morgan stopped the astrolabe and then began to run it backwards. All the while, Ezra was stating, "When weeps the stars, when cries the sun, when magic crests, then shall the astrolabe sleep. When the limb of the sextant has run its course, when power fails, when the astrolabe has feasted, when cease its labors and sleep." And at that moment, a thinning appeared, and creatures began to pour out of it. Nels, who wasn't present before, had come up to the astrolabe to see what was going on, and they were completely taken over. These creatures ripped Nels apart just in front of both Ezra and Morgan. Morgan let go of the astrolabe and began running to help Nels, but unfortunately, Nels was gone. Ezra stayed and continued the ritual, lest this entire effort be lost. They called out, "Eternal One, O great God of the Beyond, come to the aid of the land you've defended these long years. I am your compatriot. I will acquire your vessel if you only instruct me." That was when Ezra saw a giant hand reaching out of the thinning. That's when they knew the thinning wasn't big enough for whatever the Eternal One is. They knew they needed to add some sort of source to spin that astrolabe backwards. And they knew they weren't going to find that at Candela. So that is when they joined Eons. Eons had helped them create a vessel for the Eternal One, and even a device to spin the astrolabe backwards. And now, at the end of the book, we have the protection sigil that Ezra had drawn. And with all of this, they state, "I finally have all the pieces in place. Tomorrow, I will open the flare and bring forth the Eternal One." The book ends there, but that doesn't mean the story does.